Hi guys, it's Charles again, and this is another edition of the Burning Desire show. Today I have as a guest Simon Jacobs, who's someone I've known for a number of years from going to high school together and just all around kind of within the business community and just various bits and bobs. Simon's a very, very interesting character. Hopefully we'll dig into some of that detail, and he's certainly on a different journey to most people, and I think that's what makes him very interesting. And I'm sure there's some lessons we can learn and things that we can definitely discuss of interest to everybody. So, without further ado, Simon, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, Charles. I'm doing great, thank you. It's a lovely day here in Manchester. I say lovely, it's not raining. But yeah, I'm great. Staying safe and indoors.
Super. So I'm just having a little browse through your, or have done through your LinkedIn profile, and there's some interesting stuff that popped up. The first thing that interested me was this. So you bought a lordship online, and you mentioned that you blagged your way out of being deported from New York City, and then got onto a track show. Can you tell us some more about that? What happened and how that came about?
Yeah, sure. So for those who don't know, I think actually anyone can buy one. So you can buy a lordship online. So basically, there's an old feudal law in the UK. I think it's from like the 1700s or something. And basically, it said that anyone who owned a certain amount of land and a manor was effectively a lord of the manor. So some enterprising people decided to buy some old manor land and sell like square foots of it for 20 quid, etc. And so when I was 15, I was looking online. I was looking at ways to possibly avoid going to university. So I was looking to buy like a doctorate or any way to get out having to do more academia, basically. And that was too expensive. And I came across this lordship thing. It was 20 quid. So I thought, go on then. Ran downstairs to my parents, told them what I'd done. They said, Simon, you're being an idiot. Don't be silly. Which has been kind of the reaction I get from them constantly whenever I tell them I do something else.
Is that a good sign now for you? If you
it is actually, it is. That's a really good insight there. Definitely. As soon as my parents say, "Don't be stupid," I'm like, "Oh, this is a winner." No, I joke, but actually, obviously, I follow their advice on a lot of things, but they do say that quite a lot. But yeah, so about a month or so after I bought this lordship, I went on a youth trip to America. First time in America. It was about 30 of us, and on the last day, the leaders of the groups set us like a treasure hunt style challenge. So they gave us a list of things that you can go and do in New York. So basically, we go and explore the city a bit more. So things like go take as many pictures in as many different Starbucks as possible, because obviously they're everywhere. Bribe your way somehow into a hotel suite, just get a picture with it. What else was there? I can't think of the top of my head of all the lists, but the other two things were like take a picture of a celebrity and busk in Times Square. So we'd done the rest of the list, and we were up to busk in Times Square. So it was myself and seven friends, I think all of which were from London. I was the token Mancunian, which I loved, I thrived on. But we were busking. We decided to belt out Wonderwall by Oasis. So being the Manc that I am, it really resonated. So there we were belting it out. And then we were getting some change. People were giving us a bit of money, some dimes here and there, mainly out of pity, I reckon. But all of a sudden, I felt a massive hand on my left shoulder. And I turn and look up, and it's this 7 foot New York cop looking down at me. I turned to my right, and all my friends had. Can I swear on this?
I'll refrain. Not.
All my friends had cleared off, shall we say?
Okay.
Ran away. At which point the cop starts yelling at me, telling me, it's illegal to busk in Times Square. Take me down to the station, and at this point it was just a blur. But I remember being verbally abused, basically. And I think he must have seen that I was on like the verge of tears and just a proper breakdown, and he let up slightly. And at this point, this is where it kind of becomes an out-of-body experience, and I start to hear my own voice, and I started to hear myself go, "I'm sorry, I didn't know it was illegal to busk in Times Square. I wouldn't have done it. We were part of this youth trip." And then I said the immortal words of, "I'm actually a lord."
Oh my god! You actually said that out loud as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can still hear it ringing in my head because I can't believe that I still can't believe that I said it.
Wow.
I was 16, 17 at the time. I wasn't who I am now. I was nowhere near as confident. And he kind of did a double take as you would. And at this point, my friends had seen that I'd quelled the issue, I suppose you would say. He was slightly more polite, and they'd heard the conversation. They'd heard me say, "I'm a lord," and they knew about the card. So they said, "Simon, show him the card. Show him the card." So I reached into my pocket, shaking, and pulled out my wallet, pulled out the bank card that had Lord Simon Jacobs on it, and handed it to him. And he kind of looked at it, looked back at me, looked at it again, looked back at me, and then he bowed.
No.
Yeah, he did a little bow, and we had to play it cool as if, yeah, you should be bowing, because if we'd reacted like, laughing out loud.
Sure.
So we had to go with it. And then he was like asking us questions like, why are you a lord? And I said, oh, my dad owns Lancashire, and various things like that. And then he took pictures with us, and basically he just apologized and then went off. He said, have a good rest of your time here, don't busk in Town Square again, and then walked off. And it was only recently that someone pointed out to me, I was there thinking, oh, I'm going to get, taken to jail. I'm going to cause this incident.
Yeah.
And then he was walking off probably thinking, I almost caused an international incident. He's gone home to his wife and kids
True.
and said, I've just met this lord. So that was actually a really important moment for me, because up until that point, I had rocked the boat here and there. I'd done a few things, but this was kind of like the ultimate in, kind of do something and ask for forgiveness, not for permission, sort of a thing.
Yes.
And also it was me buying something that I thought was fun and interesting, and it working out. And it was a really big lesson for me to take. So I'm really pleased that happens, and also the way that I live my life is, as long as I get a story out of it, I'm happy, basically.
Yes, it's quite a nice kind of thing to think about. And I've had my own trials and tribulations, and I often think back, and it's like, I've got things to talk about, I've got things to lean on, I've got experience to be able to give out to other people and all the rest of it. But to a level, you've got to go through certain things, and you've got to learn and experience it yourself. It's all well and good people telling you, don't do this, don't do that, or whatever. But until you experience all the emotional range that you go through and that whole process, then you don't really get much out of it.
Absolutely.
So then just briefly, then you got on a chat show somehow. How did that come about?
Oh yes.
That?
Yeah, so we were walking back towards meeting with a big group, the 30 of us.
Yep.
To our meeting point, and we'd given up on the other tasks, basically. I mean, I think we had a couple left, and we were walking back, and we saw this huge crowd of people, and we saw one of the boom mics with the fluffy bit on the end. Obviously, you'll know.
Familiar, yes.
Exactly, and so we go into the crowd, we push our way forward, and we get to where the railings are, and we see that they're filming this thing. There's a guy with a desk and a chair next to him. The classic chat,
Sure.
The classic chat show setup. And I'm stood right next to the guy holding the boom, and I just chat with him. He's not in range of the boom, so he doesn't mind.
Yeah.
And filled with this new confidence of my lordship,
Sure.
I have this conversation with him. I tell him, who we are, what we're about, and I say the immortal words again. I'm actually a lord.
Just the same day, like literally.
This is within the hour of it just happening.
Right.
So I've still got that adrenaline pumping in my.
You're seeing how far can this go now?
Exactly.
Okay.
So I tell him I'm a lord. He does the double take, as you would. I show him the card, and he does. You can't see me now, but he does. The timeout sign. Like in basketball, the T from his hands to the people on the show. So he puts his hand down, and they all stop. They all stop filming, and then they come over towards me and my friends, and they start asking me questions. And again, I go on the blag, Lancashire, etc. And they're like, "Oh, would you want to be on the chat show?" I'm like, "Yep, let's do it." So they pull me around the railings. They tell me what the concept of the show is. It's like, I think it was one of like the first internet shows. This was 10 years ago now.
Wow.
It was one of like the first internet shows or something, and they basically say, "Look, we'll pull you on for like 5 minutes for a quick chat if you don't mind." They're being really polite as well. I think they really did think I was royalty, and And so they pull me on. The guy's interviewing me. I'm sat there in my England kit. It says Jacobs on the back in my pink shorts, big Jufro, answering all these questions about, knowing the Queen and meeting David Beckham and stuff.
Wow.
Goes really well. They seem to enjoy the interview. And then afterwards, they introduce us to this lady who had been waiting to come on the show, who was meant to be on before me. Turns out she was an actress in the third Final Destination or something. So. Right. So not only did we meet a celebrity and get a picture with her, but I technically became one.
You jumped there even, yeah.
Exactly. So that was a beautiful moment. This little £20 purchase became like the best thing I've ever bought, really.
So from that kind of leads us nicely on as a segue. So from that position there, the next kind of pivotal thing that I know that you did, and you might have some other stuff within here to how you got to this. But then when you went to university, you actually started some real interesting enterprises and entrepreneurship kind of activities. Can you tell us a bit more about those and possibly how you think that experience of the newfound confidence and using your attributes to the best of your ability and kind of almost being surprised as to how far confidence and talk can take you, really?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So yeah, you're right. The next big thing was university. So prior to that, I started a blog in school, and that kind of again sort of gave me a nod towards rocking the boat and the whole do things and ask for forgiveness instead of permission. And so when I got to university, there was a magazine running there, as far as I was aware. But in the year that I got there, they stopped printing, and right. that was a big shame for me because I really wanted to get into that. I was studying international business, but journalism and that sort of stuff was always an interest to me. Mm-hmm. So over the course of the summer after the first year of university, I came up with a name for a magazine and an idea for it, basically. So the magazine idea name was You Need to Know, so UNI and then the number 2 KNOW, obviously a play on words. You need to know. Yeah. And as soon as I came up with that name, I thought I have to do something with it. And then the idea was, I'd make this a print magazine, and all the advertising would cover the cost, and we'd give it out free to students.
Right.
So the following year, so the second year, I sent out an email to a bunch of students. So, your English writing students, journalism students, photography, design, etc. Anyone who I thought would be interested in the magazine.
Yeah.
Booked a meeting room for about 5 people, and about 50 people turned up. So we had to move into a bigger room, which was really, wow. which was kind of, it was the first sign that I was onto something, really, I suppose.
Absolutely.
So that was really exciting. And, at that point, I had pretty much no experience with, anything. I hadn't really run a business, hadn't done anything, never done a public speaking, really. I'd done drama at GCSE, which was actually a really important thing for me to do. But at this point, when these 50 people came in, I had to pretend as if I knew what I was doing, what was going on, etc. And so I stood in front of these 50 people, told them the idea, told them, why they should get involved. And then it went from strength to strength, really. We launched the first edition in the March of that year, which was really exciting. So that was a real trial by fire. I'd never done anything in terms of publishing, really. I've never printed anything. I had to learn about all the different kind of bindings that you need on magazines, how the different designs work. I was effectively the editor-in-chief, and my English skills were not up to par, shall we say. I'm basically just managing a business. But yes. And you asked the question about confidence, and there really is something to be said for fake it until you make it. And by that I don't mean fake, buying all these cars and pretending to be someone that you're not, but stepping up a level above, at least.
I'm glad you actually, just to ensure that, I'm glad you made that point, because it's something that I personally have kind of done, I suppose, and also live vicariously through. And I think there's so much of this kind of motivational speakers like Grant Cardone or Gary Vaynerchuk, and I think yes, they do say some interesting things, but I think also too many people hang on every word they say. They buy all these tickets and everything else when they'd be better off actually just trying and starting something with the £1,000 they spent on all the literature and tickets and positive. If what comes out of that is a positive experience and people are motivated to do things, I'm all for it. But I think absolutely like the Richard Branson, I think is where it came from. Fake to make it. It works to a level in terms of absolutely like, you know, even if you're in a company, you're not necessarily an entrepreneur. You know, they say dress for the job you want and act that way. I think there's absolutely a lot to be said for that. And I'm sure we can come on to that, what you do. But absolutely, I'm so with you that people take these kind of adages so far that actually they become just a lie and a confidence or a con person, really. And I think that there is like, you just have to realize where you're going too far and where actually, in your instances, where actually it's more about necessity. Like you create something and you have to step up to the plate. You're just, you know, feeling your way through it and kind of having that newfound confidence and just having to kind of put two and two together and make five, hopefully, rather than, as you say, just going, I need to have X possession or I need to be in Y place, so I'll buy a ticket to this, that, and the other. And that's a downhill spiral, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with everything you've just said. And you know what, that's a lesson. That's a lesson that I've also learned. You know, there were and have been incidences where I have literally faked it, you know, before I made it, and it hasn't bode well, shall we say. But when you look back at the points where I stepped up, shall we say, and went beyond what I thought was capable of myself, or, you know, the experience that I'd had, those are the times when I've done well, and actually when I've learned the most, you know, because if you don't step out of your comfort zone and push yourself slightly, you'll never learn. You need to experience those things.
These people all together in this room. You've launched the first edition. On that first edition in that March, this is the second year now. I think you mentioned. Where did you get the advertisers from? Did you just approach local businesses and say, "Hey, here's what we're doing. We're gonna have good circulation. We need £500," or how did you price it? How did that all work?
That was exactly right. So I personally went round to all the local businesses. I'd never done any kind of sales before. Absolutely hated it. It was the worst experience of my life. But it was again, it was a thing that I had to do, had to get used to. So I printed out this brochure of this concept of this magazine, and basically managed to pull together enough to be able to print. I think it was 10,000 editions. Wow. So I can't remember the total spend actually. It was a few £1,000s to get it printed. So we raised enough through advertising. I said this on another podcast actually. When I say that it went well in terms of the sales in the businesses, in the local businesses, what I mean by that is I didn't what's a clean word? I didn't poo my pants. You know, that's how I that's my concept of success in this world. You know, that would have been the lowest of the low. And I didn't do that. So, you know, and I managed to raise enough after speaking to loads of businesses. So, yeah. So we sent it off to the printers. It got delivered. There was a bit of a mishap there, but we got it in the end. And then we handed them out around the campus, in halls and in the city centre. And there's another fun story if you're interested when we started distributing it. So we would distribute. So half of our distribution plan was in halls and various places that we could essentially get into without much hassle. So people had access to the halls, and then the other 50% was in the city centre, which is where a lot of the students were. So there we were handing out these magazines. Basically, the premise was that people who were involved in the magazine had to distribute as well. So if you wrote for the magazine, you have to help distribute as part of the deal. So get a call from one of my distributors saying that they've just been shouted at essentially by one of these civil support officers, telling them that it's you're not allowed to hand out free material in the city centre unless you have a pass. And basically, if you carry on doing it, you're going to get fined. And I think it was quite a hefty fine, actually. So naturally, I was worried, and I told everyone else who was distributing the city centre to stop. And I had a bit of a moment, went back to my halls and had a bit of bit of a, well, I didn't have a cry, but you know, it was a
So,
dark moment because 50% of the distribution was planned out in the city centre, and obviously
right.
I
So you're
promised
thinking, oh no, this is all kind of
yeah,
crumbling
exactly.
now.
I thought it was over. You know, I'd spent thousands on this print. You know, promised all these businesses this exposure, etc. And actually reflecting on it, I've not done that much reflection on it before, actually, but having thought about it now, you know, you think that everyone is really concentrating on you getting these things out, but actually the reality was that these businesses had given me 200, 300 quid. They didn't really care, you know. They weren't watching my every move, you know.
Yes.
They weren't texting me all the time going. It was my own perception that I'd let these people down and stuff. But that's by the by. But I found some energy, some motivation, and I started googling things, and I ended up on the Nottingham City Centre website.
Right.
And I was in the bylaw section, just casually going over all the terms and conditions and stuff. And I must have got down to the bottom of the page. And it was talking about distribution, and there was a section on charities and religion, and it said, I'm paraphrasing here, but it said if you're a charity or a religion, you can hand out material freely in the city centre.
Right.
And that was intriguing, and more curiosity. I googled the word charity, tried to get a grasp of what it meant, and there was a very clear definition in the UK. You know, you have to have a charity number, you have to have a bank account. There's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy around it, quite fairly, you know.
Yes.
So at that point, I thought, oh well, I can't set up a charity, and also I thought it was a bit immoral to set up a charity just to be able to run a business. But then I googled the word religion, and there was a slightly wishy-washier explanation of what a religion was. There was no real definition, as you can probably imagine. And that's when like the idea kind of struck me. Could we set up a religion? And so,
Wow.
so I came up with the idea to call the religion You Need to Pray. And the idea was that the magazine was going to be the scriptures, and I would be like the deity, and that would be it. Basically, it would be the religion of the students. So I set up I think it was a Wix website called You Need to Pray. It explained about the religion. You know, it compared it to all the other world known religions, of course. And then the next day, I called all the people who were working on the magazine with me into a room, explained my idea. You know, I said it with tongue in cheek. I said, "Look, this is a joke. We can talk about it. You know, after we've done it, let's give it a go." I gave everyone these like lanyards with a pamphlet about the religion, the printed out bylaws, and basically an explanation of what to say to someone when they challenge you.
Right.
And I sent them out, and about a couple hours later, I got a call from one of them saying the same civil support officer had come up to them and started, you know, arguing with them.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, that's that then, you know, we'll pack up. We gave it a go. But we went on to explain that actually, fortunately, it was one of my more confident distributors. He went on to say that he explained the religion to the civil support officer and the way that it works and showed him the laws. And the civil support officer held his hands up and said, "Very good, I'll leave you to it." And fair play to him, he respected the chutzpah, shall we say?
Yeah.
And you know, there was a bit of maybe let's not offend this new religion, and so for the next 3 years or so, we kind of got away with it. And you know, a few other businesses around that time started their own religions as well, and they changed the wording on the website eventually, but it became
amazing,
it was an amazing thing. It saved us quite a lot of money, but it was. For me, it was another really big lesson that, again, you know, try things and ask for forgiveness, not for permission, and like find loopholes, and there are always way around things. It was such a huge lesson for me.
So did you start this magazine out of an urge for a creative space or an urge to make money, or was it a bit of both, or
Another really good question. So I think, actually, if I'm honest, it was the first driver was ego. So I like the idea of being a big name on campus, a BNOC.
Yes, I've heard that too. My friends went to Nottingham as well. So
yeah. So the idea of creating this thing where, you know, everyone finds out about you and knows about you was a big driver for me, actually. The idea that I would be able to cut queues at clubs and things, you know, have access to all these people was really big to me, which is a bit embarrassing to admit, but that's where I was when I was younger.
That's fair enough.
You know, it comes from various different places, but you know, alongside that, there was the element of, you know, I really did like writing. I like the idea of working with other creative people, and yeah, money was a driver as well, you know. But at the same time, I didn't know what money there was to be made on this magazine at the time. I just knew that, you know, if it grew, there was an opportunity. You know, you could take it to various other universities, etc. So yeah,
Sure.
those were the drivers for it.
Okay, then so from there, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall you telling me that you then spawned another business out of university in terms of which I think was far more profitable in regards to helping solve issues that many students might have in regards to letting and that kind of stuff. Is that correct, or am I wrong with that?
Yeah. Except they're not disconnected. So
Okay.
what happened? So what happened was started this magazine, entered a Dragon's Den style competition in Nottingham. So to speak, like small businesses and stuff. Pitched the magazine. Actually won the competition. Won that. I think it was about $5,000, which again was another huge thing for me. You know, I still wasn't that confident, and all these little things added to that confidence, which was really important.
It's interesting you say this because I was just having a discussion the other day with somebody, and I explained to them that one of the greatest like little snippets or nuggets, I should say, of that I've heard was from Steve Jobs' commencement speech at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he says, amongst others, is worth checking out if you can on YouTube, everyone that's listening. One of the things he says is that you can't connect the dots going forwards, only backwards. And, you know, the point being is that you didn't know at the time in which you were in Times Square on that chat show, start the magazine, how all these things, and hopefully we'll get there in a moment, lead up to where you are now. But looking back at it, you're like, oh, that makes so much sense because that gave me that confidence, that gave me the ability to believe in myself more, etc., etc. But at the time, you just do things because whatever the motivator might be. As you said, for you with the magazine, it was more about, can I become, can I elevate my status almost within the community, the student community. But now you look back on it, and it's far more than that. But you don't know that at the time. You only know that from, you know, a hindsight position.
Yeah, absolutely. That is bang on. Absolutely. I think I've seen that commencement speech, but yeah, I think I'll rewatch it. He's bang on with the connecting the dots afterwards. Absolutely. And that's not to say there's no value in connecting the dots after the event, because that reflection is really important.
Yes.
So I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. I think as I go forward, you know, it's a lesson that you've learned. Absolutely. So did this Dragon's Den thing, won some legal fees. So with a law firm, they gave you, you know, X amount of hours, which I think which I thought was quite valuable considering my attitude to life. So that was good. And then I was coming up to the end of second year, and I was on a sandwich course. So I had a 4-year course, and one of the years was meant to be going abroad. I was studying international business. And so I'd applied to go abroad. I'd applied to go to America. I'd applied to go to Israel. Applied for a few jobs here and there. And around this point, one of the dragons from the Dragon's Den thing got in touch with me and said he'd be interested in being involved in the business properly. You know, which was really interesting. And at the same time, I'd also met someone else who was running a business in Nottingham. So he was manning the doors essentially of clubs and running events. And instead of charging entry to the clubs, he was taking people's housing requirements. So he would ask you on the door, you know, how many people do you want to live with next year? What's your budget? What part of Nottingham do you want to live in? And he had access to landlords, and he would pass that data on basically and take a reasonably big commission for filling the houses. Which was a really good business model. I don't know how well it'd hold up against GDPR these days, but actually I think it'd be okay because it was relevant. But that's by the by. And basically she'd actually advertised in the magazine, and so the three of us, myself, the dragon, and this guy, basically formed a group. So we formed the Uni2 group. So we used my brand, And the idea was that the magazine would be the Trojan horse, so it would be the thing that would give us access to the students, and we would be able to advertise all the services. So we started an estate agency called You Need to Rent, and we built in various other services under that. So you could, for example, rent a flat through us and get a free trip to Amsterdam built into the rent. So basically, you would add £2 extra to the rent a week, and in the February we'd take you to Amsterdam. So basically, you got a trip to Amsterdam and you didn't have to tell your parents that they were actually paying for it. So that was a really cool concept, and we had these big visions of becoming a UK-wide brand and franchising, etc., etc. And so basically, my third year, I decided not to go abroad and decided instead to concentrate on this business. And there are a bunch of pitfalls and learnings from that and stuff that happened. But yeah, that was Uni 2, and I ran that for about 3-4 years. Somewhere along those lines, I graduated as well. So yeah, fire away if you've got any other questions on the back of that.
So then the next thing that happens is again, I'm just looking at your LinkedIn, so I might be wrong here. Is that you then joined Camelot? Was that pretty much the next thing that happened? Near enough?
Yeah, roughly. So ran Uni 2, graduated, and then various things happened, and I decided to take a step back from the business. It wasn't going where I wanted it to go. And my two other business partners, one in particular, was mainly running the rental side of it at that point, which was the cash cow. So I said, look, I'll step back. I won't take my salary. I'll just be a silent partner. If there's anything, let me know. Which was fine. It was all amicable. And then I sort of wanted to know what to do next. I was kind of in limbo. I always liked marketing. I thought that was kind of my shtick, I suppose.
Yep.
And so I thought, I'll apply for some marketing jobs. So I printed my CV out, thinking I was the big I am. I'd run this business, raised X amount of investment. So I sent my CV off to marketing agencies. I think it was about 20 or 30 CVs I sent off, and didn't hear anything back at all. I waited a week or two, nothing. And then another one of these silly ideas came into my head. I was like, okay, well, what do marketing companies want? Why would someone hire you? I was thinking, okay, well, they want to know what you're going to be like to have in the office, and they want to know what what it's going to be like to have them sat across from you. So I thought, oh, well, I'll get some face masks of myself printed and put my CV on the back of them. And so the first time I sent CVs out, I just sent them to the businesses. I just said, like the Drum, for example, just sent it to the company address with no specific person attached to it. But this time I was a bit more methodical.
Sure.
Found the marketing manager or the owner of the business, sent the face masks off, and then about a week later I'd had 7 to 8 different calls and emails saying come for an interview, or would you be interested in this? And my ego again got the better of me, and I thought, well, clearly I'm good at this stuff, I don't need a job. So that's when I started a marketing consultancy company called Our Marketing Guys. So the idea was I would be essentially your out-of-house marketing company, like a consultancy. I want to do something a bit different. So with Uni 2, we'd had experience with marketing companies where they were really good and they did amazing work, but they weren't that interested in our success, except for us coming back to them for more work.
Sure.
Which is fine. It's a perfectly good business model. It works. But I thought, okay, well, there should be something. I'm more interested in working with people that want to work with me to grow success. And so the concept that I created was that basically I would take a revenue or profit share in a business, or an equity share, in return for way, way, way reduced fees on my marketing consultancy.
Yeah.
So basically I would have skin in the game. And went out, did workshops and started building clientele, and ran that for about 8-9 months. And then in one of the workshops that I was running, someone from Camelot was actually in the workshop, or they had some affiliation with Camelot. I can't 100% remember the detail, but he basically said that Camelot were looking for young people, innovative young people to come join the company and be involved with this new wave. Would I be interested? And I said, yeah, it sounds really exciting. This big company, again, a fuel to my ego. This person was specifically targeting me. And so essentially I moved myself down to London to become this youth consultant, I suppose, for Camelot. It was a full salaried position. It wasn't a consultancy thing, but that's how I saw it, like a youth consultant. So it was an influx of about 12 or 15 of us from various different backgrounds. So some were graduates, some were fresh out of school. I think there was another entrepreneur, and they gave us training, and they tried to integrate us into various bits of the business. So from all different departments we were put in, and basically I managed to make a bit of a name for myself, because again, I did things a bit differently. So from the startup world, I'd had, teaching about agile stuff, and how to make things move quickly, and if this then what sort of stuff. And so I was applying all of the attitude, and also the same attitude of permission and not forgiveness and not permission. And it was totally different to anything that Camelot had experienced, really, because it's a big corporate company that had at least 50% of the employees there were there from the inception of the company, so they'd been there for 25 years or so. And so they've had this new influx, and then after about 3 months or so, I got made brand manager. So brand manager is essentially the person who, well, this is how it's pitched to me. You look after all the TV campaigns, marketing campaigns, etc. So I was made brand manager of the scratch card department, which was actually the biggest department in terms of turnover in the company.
Wow.
So the concept was that I would be as far as I was concerned, I would be creating all these concepts and marketing and stuff. It turned out not to be the case. It turned out, as with a lot of big companies, all their creative stuff is done by outsourced marketing agencies. So, your BBVWs or whatever they're called. And then they come back and show it to the brand manager, who then simply goes, yes, it's on brand. No, it's not on brand, sort of thing.
Right.
Which wasn't what I wanted. And all the stuff that had made me quote unquote successful up until that point, I no longer was really allowed to do. So the creative stuff and the stuff that wasn't, I would say, particularly corporate, was now no longer, something that they were looking for from me. And so I did that for about 6 months or so. And around that point, when I was considering leaving, my business partner from Uni 2 messaged me and said, would you like to be bought out? And it was kind of perfect timing. Jumped at it, said yes, handed in my notice, and got about a month's gardening leave, which was incredible. And sold my shares, so I got a nice influx of cash. And at that point, I was still in London, still had 6 months left of my lease on my flat, and so I just started exploring. I'd never really had a gap. If anything, I'd had the opposite. I'd started work while I was in university, so I tried not to put any pressure on myself to start anything else or go for another job. And so for the next 6 months, I just had fun in London.
Okay, and then that leads us up very nicely to where you are now, and you create a company. I presume throughout all that headspace that you had, called Professional Weirdos. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, during those 6 months, had some interesting experiences. So some of them were just fun, really. Just going out and doing things that I hadn't had the time to do, hadn't had the energy to do, hadn't had the money to do. And so yeah, one of the important experiences that I had, which I didn't realize until probably quite recently, more reflection, didn't realize how important the experience was going on a thing called a London Loo Tour, which was a tour of all the public toilets around London. I'd seen it advertised somewhere, and it intrigued me. It was quirky, and it just sounded like something fun. Again, it was something that I thought would be a good story.
Yeah.
So went along. It was me and this Irish family. I think there were like 6 or 7 of them. They were a really good laugh. I kind of felt like their family at the end of it.
Sure.
The lady running it was a delight. In order to get our attention, she held up a plunger in the air to make sure that we found her. And it was just a really well thought out tour. You got to see loads of London. The weather was glorious. We got some amazing historical facts, a lot of good laughs. And at the end of it, it kind of left me. It left me really motivated. It was kind of like a nod to say that this person who was running this London Loo Tour has found something that she loves. She was obsessed with this thing and had turned it into something that she could make money from. Maybe it wasn't a full-time job, maybe it wasn't, you know, a full-time business. Certainly seems to be now. But it was kind of a nod, you know, these things exist and there are these niches that people tap into. And as I say, I didn't realize this until recently. But then, you know, a few weeks later, I met up with a friend of mine. She runs a successful like blogging school, I think you should call it. So teaches people how to make, you know, success out of writing a blog and, you know, build a personal brand, etc. And we were just having chats about what I should do next. And, you know, I was saying I don't really want to do marketing consultancy again. Whilst I enjoyed the creative aspect of it, I dislike the client management and having to go out and get those clients. And she said, Simon, you're a bit weird. And obviously, when someone calls you a bit weird, you recoil slightly.
Yes.
But I let her continue, and she went on to explain that, you know, all these things that I'd done previously, all these experiences that I had were outside of the norm. You know, they weren't things that other people had experienced. And the things that I'd done had been mainly been the reason that I'd been quote unquote successful. So the reason, you know, when someone was to look at me from the outside, you know, they would think that I was successful, you know, when they would compare themselves, you know, which is something you can debate about. But she was right, and you know, it was the stuff that I really enjoyed doing as well, being the weirdo and the outside the box. And she said, you know, there's value to it if you can bottle it in some way. And that was like a eureka moment, you know, if I could somehow use this weirdness in its purest form and, you know, teach it, spread it, sell it, whatever, there was value to it. And so then my next step was setting up a Facebook group called "Is the World Strange or Am I?", which is the name of a song by a singer that I really like called Cosmo Jarvis. And basically the Facebook group grew. The concept was I wanted to find other people who thought about things differently, did things outside the box, basically form a community around it and like build a base for what might become something. And so it grew quite quickly over the space of like 3 or 4 months. We got like 1,000 members. It was really exciting. And then a bit more thinking, and I was trying to describe what it was that I was or what I was going to be. And it was something like I realized, okay, so I'm a weirdo, but I want to make it, you know, a job. I want to make it a profession. And then I realized, oh, well, Professional Weirdos. And that explained it perfectly, you know, explained what I was, but also it was something that I thought people would like to, you know, badge themselves as well. You know, you might not work for Professional Weirdos, but within your industry, you are a professional weirdo. So it had 2 or 3 meanings to me. You know, it was people who were weird and did that professionally. So the London Loo tour lady, she was a weirdo and she did that, you know, professionally. And then there were people who were professionals but were weird. So that's who I would class myself as when I was in Camelot. So I was professional, but at the same time, I was weird compared to the others in the business. And then there was me. I was now this professional weirdo, so I was kind of like Professional Weirdo cubed almost. So the idea grew, and the concept was that I would go in and do training for corporates and big businesses on how to, you know, think outside the box, be welcoming to outside ideas and out the box thinking.
Yeah, and so that's led you to some pretty interesting places. I take it, in some big corporates. And I'm curious as to how do people find you from that angle? Do you do outreach, or people kind of word of mouth? And I'm also curious, in those those kind of workshops that you have, do you find that the people that are brought into those workshops are all from a similar kind of category of, you know, marketing or whatever the case may be within that company? And I guess also, are different companies more susceptible to this than others, or have you kind of had a broad stroke across different industries?
Yeah, so okay, let's break it down. So yeah, so I've done talks at John Lewis and Waitrose, for example.
Okay.
So the John Lewis gig was actually, my girlfriend works at John Lewis. You know, you might as well be open and honest. You know, it's only fair to say that these are where the connections are made.
Yeah, sure.
So she didn't put me in touch necessarily, but she told me that they do this thing called Spark Talks, which is where they invite interesting speakers to come in and deliver, you know, a session with them. So I emailed and said, I run this company called Professional Weirdos. Would you be interested? They kind of bit my arm off, which was great, really exciting. Went in, and did a talk to about 70 people. So to answer your question in terms of who turns up, it was everyone and anyone that was really in the business. So it was at the head office in London, and people from HR, people from marketing, people from strategy innovation, and basically I told my story. All these trials, tribulations, weirdness. I do a bit of an activity, and just get them to think outside the box. So an example that I give is when I was at Camelot, I used to sit at a desk and there was a fire extinguisher that I used to knock my leg on all the time. And it was like screwed to the desk. And then one day I just thought, you know what, I'm going to change this. And I unscrewed it and put it to the other side of the desk. And that was like another big thing where you think, sort of like acknowledging the things around it you can change and open your mind, these little things in front of you. And I give these examples and people come up to me and go and tell me about things that really annoy them that they're going to go away and change.
Okay.
And having not had that talk, they would have sat there with that fire extinguisher next to them for the rest of their working life.
Sure.
So to answer your question, so far the reception has been really good. So typically, corporates are quite open to it, because it answers quite a few briefs. It answers a creative brief, it answers an innovation brief, it answers a bit of a mental health well-being, because it's about getting outside, it's about opening yourself up, it's about changing mindsets.
Sure.
So I've not had any negative reactions to it, either when I pitch or when I deliver it. But equally, it's quite a hard sell. So I've not done that many, because it's still a fluid thing that I'm still trying to figure out as well. You have to get the right balance between doing a wishy-washy, this is going to be a fun workshop, versus these are the outcomes that you're going to achieve on the back of it. So that's still something that I'm slashing my way through. So I'm currently looking to possibly get it accredited, so it becomes like an official part of your CPD, so your continual personal development, so that people can put it on their CVs and their LinkedIn, etc.
Interesting.
So that's an interesting turn. So that's something that comes on the back of what I'm also doing at the moment, which I can go on to if you're interested.
Yeah, sure. It's been a super. These podcasts are normally kind of 20 to 30 minutes, which is no good or bad thing upon the people that I speak to normally. But for whatever reason, this has been a nice, free-flowing conversation. I see no reason to stop it. So, let us know what's then happened now, and where are you at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So I came up with the concept of Professional Weirdos whilst I was still living in London. So it was about 2 months before I moved out. And at that where I didn't know what it was at that point, and then I decided to move back to Manchester. So I moved back with my parents, which some people would see as like a backward step or something. It never really crossed my mind. It was just I
did the same thing. And
exactly.
For me, I actually was very, very against it at a certain point, and then now I'm like, it's so beneficial to me from a number of different angles. Absolutely.
Yeah, I wasn't that against it. It was kind of like I loved living in London. I was upset about having to move. I was upset about moving out. But other than that, it wasn't a real big like issue for me. So I moved back to Manchester, carried on sort of deciding what Professional Weirdos was going to be, constantly like shifting it, changing it, trying to decide how to make money out of it.
At this point, where are your parents in this thing? Because they've seen you now go from some pretty wild and wonderful ideas, probably bearing on the positive side for you, and kind of not quite understanding where you're coming from. I had the same. My parents in a different way. And I think most people do. They kind of push the envelope a bit. So they've gone from that. They've then seen you be successful, quote unquote, as you say, within the university business career, and then also with Camelot, etc. So where are they at this point? Are they kind of like, oh, we've seen this work for you before, so we'll let you run with it? Or are they still kind of like, oh, maybe this year you've pushed as far as it'll go, really you should now get a serious job or whatever that might mean?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, Charles. So I would say that generally my parents are really quite chilled. They've never been particularly pushy either way. They at the same time they don't understand this business world. You know, they've both had 9-to-5 jobs,
Sure.
so it's always been quite alien to them. You know, which has taken quite a lot of getting used to. You know, I wouldn't say we've had arguments, but we've had heated discussions about things. So even when I was running the uni business, you know, it wasn't in their eyes quite a success. You know, for the first 2 or 3 years, because I wasn't bringing in a regular salary. You know, it was still a startup sort of thing. So only when I sold my shares and I had this role at Camelot did they start to see, okay, he's clearly, you know, got something. You know, like I say, they weren't negative about it, but at the same time, their worries weren't washed away while I was doing these things. But they were quite happy with when I was at Camelot and when I sold these shares. So when I moved back in, they were neither here nor there. They were just like, yeah, fine, whatever. We'll see what comes. When I told them about Professional Weirdos and the idea, I think it was another thing where they go, we don't understand, but crack on, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, fair enough to them. And so so I moved back in, and like it was an ever changing thing. I still didn't know, like, in my head, I still didn't know how to pitch this idea to corporates. You know, it was a case of, and I was making excuse for myself as well, you know, not putting it out there. You know, it was a case of it's not ready, or I don't know what it is. I don't know how to sell it. I don't know how to get these contacts, etc.
Yeah.
And it kept going and going and going. And I made a few connections here and there and a few strides. So like I said, I did this talk at John Lewis. You know, I was making inroads. And when I did this talk, the person who organized it at the end said, look, I would like you to come and do a talk at the national conference, which was incredible. But that never came to fruition for whatever reason.
Sure.
You know, there's always opportunities of it happening in the future, but you know, it was a mixture of someone saying yes, this is a thing, and then there was a mixture of it didn't actually happen.
Sure.
So it was kind of a lull, you know, a false hope. And so I kept pushing myself and saying, no, I don't need a job. I don't need an income. I've got this money keeping me afloat. I can take, you know, I'm using my credit cards to keep me afloat, etc. And then it got to the point where literally I just couldn't sustain it anymore. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to get a job. I would prefer not to get a 9-to-5, sit in an office, whatever. So I was looking online and I came across this job in Burnley, which was basically a digital marketing tutor / lecturer. So this company in Burnley, marketing company, had made a partnership with Burnley College to set up a digital marketing course run by experts, essentially. So they'd had an apprentice from Burnley College themselves who was on a digital marketing course, and they weren't very up to date with their knowledge because they'd been taught by academics basically who weren't in the industry. So they wanted to, you know, they're a marketing company, they're experts, so they wanted to set something up where they could teach people by experts. So they set up this thing called Project Digital, and basically someone had left a position and they wanted someone else to fill it, and I thought it was quite exciting, you know, the idea of being able to share my experience, share my knowledge of the digital world, and you know, keep going with my public speaking, and it'd be quite a flexible thing. So applied for that and I got it. And so now Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday I do lecturing. It's kind of like workshops, so day-long workshops about digital marketing to these apprentices, which is just a really interesting thing to be involved in. And you know, Mondays and Fridays I work from home, so it's a lot of planning and stuff, but I also have time to do my own stuff, which is really good, and they're quite open to it, and they've got nothing against me doing Professional Weirdos so long as it, you know, doesn't detract. So since I took that, which was about in August, I published my first book, which is called Get Started. So that was an interesting experience as well. So yeah, so that's kind of where I am at the moment. So I'm working on the lecturing, still building Professional Weirdos, and I've got this book that I'm promoting as well.
Brilliant. And I think that's a great place to leave it. Possibly the only further question is, what's next for you? Is it really to try and push this Professional Weirdos things further? And is the kind of ideal position for you to be in to be sustaining, talking to corporates on a regular basis, like you did at John Lewis, delivering those sort of workshops? And you mentioned this accreditation thing. Is that the direction at the moment that you see it going in and want it to go in?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I'll try and be as quick as possible. So with Project Digital, actually, it's a really cool thing that that I was really interested in the concept, and the owners of the business want to grow it, but obviously they've got the marketing agency, so there's potential for me to step in and be part of the business there, which is really exciting because it's a
Okay.
huge concept in the north. There's such a huge skill gap, at least in that area of the world. So to be able to grow this thing is massive. So there's that. And then, yes, so the way that I found out about the accreditation was through this Project Digital thing.
I see.
So basically, you get open to this new world of like accreditation and like why companies pay, and there's levies and funds and things. And so if I can tap into that in some way with Professional Weirdos, there's a lot of there's a lot of access, a lot of doors that could be open. So that's what I'm looking to do, looking to possibly get it accredited, and also shift it slightly. So whilst I will still concentrate on corporate, there is an individual thing that I want to move towards. So something, if you look at my LinkedIn, it's a bit out of the ordinary. My profile picture is a bit weird, and I use different wording and stuff like that. And there's a lot to be said. There's value in being able to tell people how to do those things, and encourage them to be outside of the box. So I'm also going to try and move into the individual space. So teaching people how to be more confident about putting things out there. And then I'm hoping to promote this book a bit more, and I've got another one to publish as well, which will be about which is called 367 different things to get you outside your comfort zone, which I need a better title for because it's really long. But
Why
basically,
367? You just happened to come up with that number, or?
well, I wanted something for every day, and I thought I'd add two extra things to to cover, because it had to be slightly out of the ordinary, and also I'd made this list and I realized that I had more than I needed.
Got you.
And basically all it is it's a list with explanations of why you would do these things, of slightly things that are out of the ordinary to get you out of your comfort zone. So it varies from wear odd socks, which to some people would be the worst thing in the world, to be sat there with odd socks, to like saying hello to someone on the tube. It's just like little nods to get you outside your comfort zone, and to unleash your inner weirdo, basically. So yeah, those are like the three things that I'm looking at. The Professional Weirdos for me, something I always do is look to have a bigger vision, for the company. So it's not just doing talks and things. I want it to become a concept or a badge almost. I want people to take hold of it and be like, I am a professional weirdo. I want it to be like something that people have on their LinkedIn profiles, that it defines them. I am a professional weirdo. And likewise, I see it becoming, I have plans of it becoming like a way of thinking almost. So every industry has its professional weirdos. So in the property world, I'd love people to do things differently and think outside the box, etc. So yeah, that's my long-term vision for it.
Brilliant. I think that's a really good place to leave it, and a noble mission to kind of pursue. And I think you'll do well, absolutely, at some point. You've been successful in the past, and there's no reason why you won't connect some of these dots you're doing now, and that'll kind of move on in like a year's time. I'm sure we'll be in a very different place, and be interesting to kind of catch up with you at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much for the time.
Pleasure.
I say it's been slightly longer than usual, but that's for good reason. You've been very interesting, and that's no disrespect to my previous guest by any stretch. It's just been a great conversation.
Yeah, sure.
So I look forward to kind of following you. I'm sure we can find you on all the usual places. You've got the Professional Weirdos page on Facebook, right? And you've got obviously on LinkedIn, etc. So people can find you there. Thank you once again, and look forward to catching up with you very soon, Simon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, pleasure, Charles. Thank you very much.